My name's Colin. We are going to do part two of this walk through history from at least 1550 up until 2025. And we're following a path that is on a map, which hopefully I will be cutting into the video now. So we did part one before, and now we are going to continue with part two. Let me spin around so we got the microphone facing me. There we go. So, as I say, we look in the map. We started off down at Trafalgar Square, as is now, and we followed the right hand fork up, and we are going to follow it up through what is Wardour Street, what used to be known as Coleman Hedge Lane, and it leads up to what used to be known as the way to Uxbridge and what is currently known as Oxford Street. Now, our first stop on this one is this building, which I go to on a regular basis. This is the Marquee. This is a Chinese restaurant. It happens to be my preferred one. Everybody has their own. But up above, don't know if you can see, let me spin around a bit. There's a big clock on the front, and it says Costumier Perruquier. And obviously that's in French, and that's why I sound like that. And the question is why? Well, on the blue plaque underneath it explains, to a certain extent. It says William Clarkson, 1861 to 1934, theatrical wig maker. Now, this guy was one of the top people in his game. So his dad had started the business in the 1830s, and obviously Willie then took it over, and they were the top wig makers of their day. Do like a bit of noise. Not just for the theatrical trade, but for aristocracy and everything. Indeed, by 1906, he was advertising saying that he was wig maker to the king. Previously, in 1900, he had attended a big exhibition in Paris and had won the prestigious prize there for being the best wig maker. And hence, I suppose, the clock with the French writing on it. But if we go over here at the foundation stone of the building, it says Sarah Bernhardt laid the foundation stone of this building 1904. Now, she was one of the top French actresses of her day. I believe she was French. And then Sir Henry Irving, one of the great people in the English theatre. Sir Henry Irving laid the coping stone of this building in 1905. So within a year of each other, you had these two great people from the theatre getting involved with Willie's business. Now, that all sounds very kosher, doesn't it? So, let's see. Bear with me, just double checking something. Yeah. So far so good. He's wig maker to the king. He's wig maker to the theatrical profession, and that is almost like the one face of Willie Clarkson and his business empire. But he had another one. Now, so good was Willie with his wigs and various other aspects of theatricality that the police and the criminals would both come to him for disguises. And apparently Dr. Crippen and his partner were said to be wearing one of Willie's disguises whenever they were caught. So he had that aspect to his business. His other aspect was blackmail and insurance fraud, because he owned various properties around London, and not one, not two, but 11 of them unfortunately caught fire, and he took the insurance money. So he's a very, very unfortunate man. And he also had a property which was up near a public toilet, which was a known place for where homosexual people would go to meet. And Willie had someone in place by the toilet, on his property by the toilet, keeping a record of the comings and goings of various people, and then he would blackmail them. And I believe the property was known as Clarkson's Chalet. So he was obviously a very dodgy character. Must have been well enough, like, because he does have a spot apparently in the Actors' Church because of all the stuff that he provided for the theatrical industry. But obviously a very dodgy character. Aha, okay, so we're good. So it's not often you get to see Shaftesbury Avenue this empty. So let's just, there we go. So obviously here is the Sondheim Theatre. I'm sure this used to be called the Queen's, but it was renamed the Sondheim when Stephen Sondheim died. And as you can see, this is currently playing Les Miserables. And that is the longest running musical in London history at the minute. Hasn't always played there, but in terms of, its running time, it overtook Cats. And here we go, St Anne's Church. I'll just tilt up. Now, I know we looked this briefly during the Soho walk, but I just thought we'd come into the park this time. So this was consecrated in, I believe, 1686. The tower at one point, I think it was cracking and going to fall down, so they built it around 1801. But then the whole place got damaged during the Blitz, 1940, 41. So there is a more modern bit, the church sort of added onto the back, which you can enter in by, what is it now, where are we? I think it is Frith Street. And there are some plaques here for various people, including Theodore, King of Corsica. I think if I remember right, he was in exile here. And I think I mentioned in the Soho walk that Dorothy L. Sayers, she did the Lord Peter Wimsey books. She is, her ashes are interred inside, I think, under the tower, because she was a church warden here, even though she lived out in Essex for a lot of her life later on. Hazlitt, this is a big plinth over there, big stone plinth. Hazlitt, that'll be William Hazlitt, the guy that we discussed in this, it was the second Soho walk, the diarist and critic. Okay. There we go. There's a bit about the history here. I will show it up. In case you want to pause and have a look. So we're getting into Soho proper on Wardour Street, and we sort of crisscrossed here during the earlier walk, but we didn't actually really do much on Wardour Street. Now, Wardour Street, from the early 1900s onwards, let's go back a bit, 1800s, 1700s, 1800s, became known for antiques of a sort. Basically, as grand houses around Europe and whatnot lost their the people who lived in them, be it through the French Revolution, getting decapitated or whatever. There was lots of houses and the furniture was getting sold off. And a lot of antique dealerships sort of sprung up around Wardour Street. But it did become known as an area for very, shall we say, dodgy antiques. Stuff that was maybe not necessarily as antique as it was being made out to be. And so much so that there was a phrase that was developed in literary circles called Wardour Street English, which basically reflected the fact that there was a lot of books being written at that time, set in the past, where they were saying things like, prithee landlord, a stoop of your finest foaming ale, and, have at you and all that. And it became sort of almost a bit of a joke that people were putting in these really sort of weird old phrases as if that was how people spoke in those days. And because it was sort of modern sort of techniques being applied to old stuff, it became known as Wardour Street English. And that reflected the fact that a lot of the antiques that were supposedly old were actually a bit more modern than was being claimed. So that was sort of 1700s, 1800s. By the early 1900s, the film industry started taking off in London. And as you can see, Cinema House here. Started off quite small, but by 1940, there was, along this street alone, there was over 100 organisations relating to the movie industry. There's still a lot today, but although obviously there's a lot now to do with TV and that side of things. Now, I nearly forgot. Right. So, see, I was so busy talking. That corner building, just over there. See, it says the Roundhouse. Right, well that was, I'm going to step out of the sun. That was 1950s. Like the building itself, it says 1892, that's when it was rebuilt. In the 1700s was known as the Blue Cross, rebuilt 1892 as it says up near the top there. But in the 1950s it was known as there's a club in there on a weekly basis called the Skiffle and Blues Club. And then by about 1955, with the advent of rock and roll and skiffle started to lose its way a bit, it became the Barrel House Blues Club. And it was run by famous blues musicians called Alexis Corner and Cyril Davis. And they ran that club in there until the early 1960s. And Muddy Waters played in there and all the big blues names of the day. But they would hold this sort of weekly blues night. And then Corner and Davis left the club here and went off and set one up in West London, a place called Ealing. And not long after they did that, some young whippersnappers who were into their blues music decided to give it a go. They appeared for the first time at their club in Ealing and they were called the Rolling Stones. Not sure whatever happened to them. But anyway, after the blues thing finished here, they would continue to do live music, and they would do, I think it was a monthly folk night. And on the bill, there was 1965, some young guy who went on to do quite well for himself, and he was called Paul Simon. So he played in there. So, moving on. So, back to cinema, but we will be mentioning music very shortly again. So we're going to pass a fair amount of buildings with cinematic references. Now, our next point of interest. I'm hoping you can see that on the corner there is a big sort of, what do you call it, like a relief. It says the Intrepid Fox, and then you can see underneath it sort of an outline of two people, and one of them holding what looks like a newspaper or a sign. Let me just see. What does the sign say? Champion of the people. So the story of the Intrepid Fox, obviously it's not anymore because it's been redeveloped, but this was a pub. So 1700s, I think it was early 1770s. It was called the Crown. Then it got taken over by a guy called Samuel House, and he was a complete fanboy of some very dodgy Whig MP called Charles James Fox. And such a fanboy was he that he renamed the pub after him, the Intrepid Fox. So The idea of having a dodgy right-wing politician with fanatical fans obviously isn't a new thing. But this place was also famous for an event in 1784. Fox was looking like he was going to get kicked out of Parliament at an election in 1784. But he did have a little wheeze that took place here at this place. So basically, anybody that promised to vote for him would get a free pint of beer. And not only that, one of the great beauties of her age, the Duchess of Devonshire, would give you a kiss. So that all took place here. Obviously, I think that might not pass the political sort of laws today, but it worked for him because he got re-elected. And all I'm saying, I'm just putting it out there, next time there's an election, somebody wants to give me a free pint and have a quick visit, for a kiss from Halle Berry or Scarlett Johansson, I'm up for it. I'm just putting it out there. All right, my vote is for sale. So there we have Merd Street, which we visited before. That's where sort of bits of Sherlock Holmes and things have been filmed. Now, coming up on the left, building that would be close to my heart from my childhood. Scared the hell out of me many, many times. And here we have Hammer House. You can see the sort of, even the Gothic writing and everything gives it away. So Hammer Films, this was like their headquarters in London. And up the side here, see this very narrow alley? The reason that's so narrow is because this marked the boundary between two sort of estates. If I remember right, it was the Pulteney estate and the Pitt estate. And basically they had over like sort of a long period of time, they had sort of disagreements about sort of land boundaries and that sort of thing. And this narrow little alley shows the sort of boundary line between the two estates. Obviously long since gone now. But yes, Hammer House of Horror. Then look, Screen House next door to that. And then we're going to take a step back over here. And we have, it's now called the Manhattan Loft Corporation. Oh, how things have changed. But if we scroll up, there's a blue plaque in the corner there, and it says, legendary rock drummer with The Who, Keith Moon, performed here at the site of the Marquee Club in the 1960s. And let's face it, the Marquee, Keith Moon wasn't the only one. This was a who's who of British and American rock. So Led Zeppelin, let's see, the Stones, later on like U2, Bowie would have played here. Jimi Hendrix did a concert, apparently he played here one time. Absolutely, he was pig sick because he was, there's so many people. Apparently they were queued down to Shaftesbury Avenue. But there was people from the Beatles were here to see him and everything else, but apparently he just blew everybody away. But you name a band from the 60s up until the 70s, and they played here, or they wanted to, because this was like the home of rock music. But then it got sold off in the 80s. The Marquee moved down to Charing Cross Road, and then it moved again. So it's still alive somewhere, but it doesn't have the same cachet. Apparently, I think the Police, and it might have been Dire Straits, so there was a couple of bands that tried appearing under different names, just so that it wouldn't sell out straight away, and they literally would come out here trying to sell tickets and people weren't interested. That one backfired slightly. So I suppose the idea was to give other people a chance to see them, but if nobody knew who they were, obviously it wasn't no guarantee it was going to work. But there you can see Screen House still got sort of TV references in the windows. This one here is called Technicolor Creative Studios. I'm sure I've had a pint in this ship many years ago. Rings a bell. I thought there might be an interesting story behind Flaxman Court, and I looked up and I found absolutely nothing. Obviously a bit of building work going on up here. Now down there at St. Anne's Court that we visited before. That's where Ziggy Stardust and everything was recorded. We've got a couple of places facing each other here. So we'll do the one on the right first. This very Art Deco looking building, Film House, is a lovely looking building. So I'd like to think it's listed, that's why it's maybe going to get gutted and rebuilt, but not from the outside. So this was Film House, which again, movie industry, at one point had 5 private cinemas inside it, and this dates from, I think it's the 1920s, hence the Art Deco architecture. But I do like it. Behind me, we have a blue plaque, and it says Thomas Sheraton, 1751 to 1806, furniture designer, lived here. Now, remember I was saying about how this area became famous for the furniture design, furniture sales, antiquities and all that sort of thing. Well, obviously that's what he was trying to do, and design his own stuff maybe as well. He's been very influential in terms of furniture design. He wrote 4 books on the subject, and it's one of those cases where he did very well after he died. He never made any money in his own lifetime, because he seemed to devote half his time to the furniture side of things, but the other half he was like a lay preacher, I think Baptist, I think, and he seemed to be very avid into that as well. Maybe it's one of those things where if he had concentrated on the one, then maybe he would have succeeded. But his furniture books have been proved to be very influential since, even though at the time he didn't do that great. But he did get a street named after him. There we go, Sheraton Street. I'll bet there's a story behind the George, but I don't know it. The name of the street, D'Arblay Street. I did look this up. So essentially, this street is named after Madame D'Arblay. Now down the bottom there is Poland Street, and the lady who this is named after was born in Poland Street and grew up around here, and her name was Frances Burney. The reason that she became Madame D'Arblay is because later in life she married a French army officer, and that's how she got that title. But in her time, she was very she basically was a writer in the same way that Jane Austen, etc. was, and she got sort of a bit outshone by Austen. She sold quite well in her day, but it's just historically speaking, she seems to have sort of disappeared in terms of her books, even though they seem to be quite well regarded among critics. But she also was a great letter writer, and she wrote many, many letters, and apparently those are the things that historians find more fascinating now And there was one, it's even on Wikipedia, there's an excerpt from it where she describes having had to have a mastectomy because of suspected breast cancer, even though there was no evidence that that was ever proved. But she'd been having pains, and that was the diagnosis. And she had to have a mastectomy, and she describes it in great detail because this was in the days before anaesthetics. And even reading it now, makes your sort of skin crawl a bit. So, yeah, obviously a talented writer. And it's nice to see that she's been remembered in some way. So, this is Darbley Street after Frances Burdey, also known as Madame Darbley. Now we're nearly there. We have nearly reached the road to Uxbridge. Now there's one more place over here on the right. Just going to nip around here. Now, just tilt up, and you can see there it says Hat Factory, Henry Heath, Oxford Street. And basically this was the factory of a hat maker. I think it was the 1820s or 1830s until the 1920s. And it specialised in fur, especially beaver, because that was all the rage at the time. But anything furry, if you were small and furry, you did not want to be around here because you would have got made into something. But this was one of the top places. If you were because in those days, having a hat was almost, it was a socially acceptable thing to do. And obviously, if you're an aristocracy or business or whatever, even if you're just middle class and you were on your uppers, getting a well-made hat. And if, a lot of them would have had fur, a lot of the ones that maybe wouldn't even have thought of. But this would have been one of the best places to come to get that. Now, the street opposite we did at the start of the Soho walk. That was the fascist headquarters. But there you go. We have walked a path that was shown on a map in the 1550s. And it existed before that, let's face it. It was just when you know about it being there now because of the map. But it was obviously in place before that. This was a country lane, Coleman Hedge Lane. Just where those lights are was the road to Uxbridge. It was also the road to the execution point. So that was the other thing it was known for. Tyburn, that was the path he would have taken. We'll do the execution walk at some point, walking the length of Oxford Street and further beyond. That would take a good 2 or 3 walks, or 2 or 3 tours. But we'll do that one at some point. But there we'll have it. At least 1550 to 2025. So I'll spin around, even though you probably won't hear me. But hope you enjoyed that. Little walk through past history and current history. And if you're enjoying these, let me know. Have a comment below. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. But for now, that is us from just at the junction with the road to Uxbridge. And hopefully I'll see you. Oh, look at all that sun behind me. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Okay? So thanks for watching. Bye.